Have you ever shared a bed with someone you love and still felt completely invisible? They're lying inches away, same room, same routine, but the closeness that once felt comforting now feels distant. They still give you a goodnight kiss. They still hand you your morning coffee. They still sit across the table, scrolling through their phone or flipping through the paper. But something's shifted, and no one's naming it. You feel the silence, the pause that wasn't there before. You start to wonder, are we still connected? Not because of a blow-up or betrayal, but because the warmth between you has slowly gone quiet. Here's what most people never say out loud. When love starts to fade, it doesn't make a scene. It doesn't storm out the door. It doesn't leave with yelling or tears. No, when love leaves, it often tiptoes out. There's no goodbye. You just wake up one morning and realize the air feels colder, even though everything looks the same. It begins in small ways, the way they no longer hold your gaze, the way your name sounds empty in their mouth, the way your conversations shrink into checklists, errands, tasks, the day-to-day grind. Today, we're going to explore 5 of the quietest, most easily missed signs that someone has emotionally stepped away, long before they ever say the words, "I'm done." These won't be flashy, but they will be true. And once you see them, you'll understand what your heart's been trying to whisper all along. So I hope you'll stay with me until the end, because there's one sign most people overlook, and it just might change how you see your relationship and yourself. And if anything here speaks to your heart, if these words sound familiar, type relationship in the comments. Let me know you're listening. Let someone else know they're not alone. Let's begin. Sign 1, loss of curiosity. What's one of the first things to quietly disappear when love begins to unravel? It's not the hugs, not the laughter, not even the conversations, because sometimes those still happen. It's the questions. When someone truly loves you, they want to know you deeply. They ask things that seem small on the surface but mean everything. They want to know what's on your mind when you're quiet. They care how your doctor's appointment went, even if it was just a checkup. They notice when you sigh differently or take longer to answer. They lean in, because curiosity is connection in motion. But when that love starts to dim, so does the interest. They may still respond, but it's mechanical. They might say, "Uh-huh," or "Oh yeah?" But it lands flat. They don't follow up. They don't remember what you told them last week. They don't ask how your sister's doing or whether you ever finished that book you were excited about. And it's not because you've become boring. It's not because your stories suddenly lost their color. It's because their emotional investment is fading, slowly, and without a sound. That's what Edna felt. She and Paul had been married over 40 years. She used to tell him everything. How her roses had finally come back in bloom, what happened in her book club, and how she wanted to try that new yoga class. At the community center, Paul used to smile, playfully tease her and ask questions that made her feel heard. But lately he barely looked up from the television. He responded with a grunt. Sometimes not at all. At first she blamed it on stress, a bad day. Maybe he wasn't feeling well, but deep down she knew. It wasn't about the roses or the yoga. It was about the space that had quietly crept in between them, the space where curiosity used to live. When someone stops asking you questions, they're no longer trying to step into your world. And over time, it starts to feel like you're living side by side with someone who no longer sees you, really sees you, as part of theirs. So ask yourself, as gently and honestly as you can, have they stopped being curious? Or have they stopped connecting? And if that thought stings, if it brings a lump to your throat, you're not overreacting. You're responding to something real. Because loss of curiosity isn't random. It's one of the quietest, earliest signs that love has started to let go. Sign 2, decreased patience. There's a kind of love that makes room for the little things. Your quirks, your forgetfulness, the odd way you fold towels or talk to yourself while cooking dinner. When someone's heart is with you, they don't just tolerate these things. They often find them endearing. Love at its best isn't rigid. It's flexible. It bends where it needs to. It softens instead of snapping. When that kind of love is present, even your imperfections feel safe. You can laugh when you mess up. You can repeat a story and know they'll smile, not sigh. There's grace. But when that love starts to slip, something changes. The grace that once surrounded you disappears, and instead, every small thing begins to feel like a mistake. You bring up the wrong topic at the wrong time. You ask where the keys are, you mention the calendar, and suddenly there's a sharp breath, a tone you weren't expecting, a look that says, "Really? Again?" You can feel the change. Even if they haven't said anything, you start to adjust. You speak more carefully. You rehearse your words in your head before saying them. You hesitate before reminding them of something you've already said. Twice. Not because you did anything wrong, but because their patience, once so natural and easy, is gone. Let me tell you about Helen and Richard. They'd been married for decades. Helen had always been a little forgetful. She could never keep a track of her reading glasses. She'd walk into a room and forget why, and Richard used to chuckle, shake his head, and help her retrace her steps like it was part of their dance. But over the years, something in him started to harden. He no longer teased, no longer smiled. Now, he muttered, he snapped, he rolled his eyes like she was a burden. Same woman, same forgetfulness, but the warmth was gone. And that's what stings the most. Not that he didn't help her find her glasses, but that he stopped wanting to. That's the real sign. Not the annoyance itself, but the shift in what it represents. When love is strong, it absorbs the bumps in the road. It turns the messiness of daily life into something shared. But when love fades, those same bumps feel like obstacles. Every small thing becomes a source of frustration, and you start to feel like you're in the way. It's not just about a raised voice or a cold reply. It's about how much you miss the way they used to look at you when you said something silly. It's about how heavy the air feels now when you speak, and it's about the ache in your chest that whispers, "They used to enjoy me. Now they endure me." If you've felt that shift, if you're constantly checking yourself, shrinking your words, apologizing for simply existing, take a deep breath. It's not weakness, it's awareness. You're feeling the weight of something real, the quiet loss of patience that used to feel like love. And that's why you need to keep watching, because the next sign might be even harder to face. It's when shared time stops feeling shared at all. Sign 3, lack of shared time doesn't just vanish, it gets redirected. It finds new homes, new distractions, new priorities. And when someone starts spending less of it with you, not because they have to, but because they choose not to, that's when something begins to crack beneath the surface. It's rarely about the hours in a day. It's about the intention behind those hours. When love is present, people find time. Even a few quiet minutes at the end of the day can feel like connection, when it's shared with care. But when love starts to pull away, the time you used to spend together slowly starts slipping through your hands. It's not dramatic. It's not announced. It just fades. They get up earlier and leave without a word. They stay later at work or start taking longer walks alone. They watch a show in another room or scroll through their phone while you sit nearby, unnoticed. And the conversations that once filled the space between you shrink into brief exchanges about bills, errands, and what's for dinner. Let me tell you about James and Anita. They had this sweet tradition. Every evening after dinner, they'd walk the same route through their neighborhood. Sometimes they talked. Other times they simply walked in silence, hand in hand. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. It was a way to say, "I'm here, you matter to me." Over time, that rhythm changed. Anita began to notice that James was heading out without her. He'd say things like, "You looked tired," or "I didn't want to bother you." The words seemed thoughtful at first, but after a while they felt like excuses, and it started happening more often. Anita didn't say anything right away. She didn't want to seem needy or paranoid. But the walks stopped. The quiet connection was gone. And with it, something much deeper began to unravel. They still shared a roof, they still ate meals, but the emotional glue that used to hold those routines together had thinned out. And the hardest part, she still loved him. She just wasn't sure if he still felt the same way. That's the ache so many people live with. You're not alone. Maybe you felt it too, sitting on the couch together, but feeling like you're on opposite sides of the world, saying good morning, but wondering if they actually noticed your voice, wondering if their distance is about them, or about you. Here's what you need to know. When someone starts drifting, they don't always mean to hurt you, but when they stop including you in their time, whether it's a 10-minute chat or a weekend plan, they're communicating something, loud and clear, even if they don't realize it. So take a quiet moment to ask yourself, do they still choose me when it comes to the simple, ordinary moments? Or am I just someone they pass by in the background of their day? That question might be painful, but it's powerful, because sometimes the hardest truth to face is that someone can still be present in your life and yet no longer be with you. And what comes next, what we'll talk about in the next part, is what happens when they stop letting you into not just their time, but their inner world, their thoughts, their feelings, the pieces of themselves they once shared freely. When that closes off, the silence doesn't just grow louder, it becomes permanent. Sign 4. Emotional withdrawal. There's a turning point in every relationship that's beginning to unravel, and most people don't recognize it when it happens. It's not loud or dramatic. No one storms out. No one screams. It's far more subtle and far more painful. It's the moment you realize the person you love has stopped letting you in. They still go through the motions. They still sit at the table, still ask if you want anything from the store, still sleep beside you. But the emotional doors, they're shut, and you didn't even hear them close. You ask how their day was, and they say fine. You ask what's on their mind, and they reply, nothing. They haven't changed on the outside, but you can feel the shift in your gut. It's like reaching out to hold their hand and realizing you're grabbing air. You're not the one they confide in anymore. You're not the person they go to when they're overwhelmed or afraid or excited about something small. You used to be their sounding board, their safe place. Now it feels like they're having a full life, and you're only getting the headlines. That's what emotional withdrawal looks like, and it hurts, not just because they've gone quiet, but because they used to let you in, and now they don't. You're still in the same space, but no longer. Part of their internal world, their fears, their frustrations, their small joys, they hold them privately now, and that wall, the one that's quietly gone up between you, gets taller each day. You pretend not to see it. Let me tell you about Linda and Mark, married for over 25 years. They'd built a life around sharing everything, good, bad, in between. When Mark's job got stressful, Linda was the one he vented to. When he had health concerns, she was the first to know. When he lost his dad, she sat beside him and held his hand through the tears. But somewhere along the way, that trust started to fade. Not because of a fight or a crisis, it just faded. Mark stopped talking. Not completely, but enough to make Linda feel the distance. He started handling things alone, making appointments, getting bad news, keeping thoughts to himself. And when she asked what was going on, he brushed it off with, "I'm just tired," or "Don't worry about it." But Linda did worry, because she could feel it in the silence. He wasn't cold, he wasn't angry, he was just absent. And that absence, even in the middle of daily life, made her feel completely alone. This kind of withdrawal is quiet. It doesn't slam doors or cause fights. It just closes off the little windows where intimacy used to live. It's when someone stops making space for you in their heart, even if they still make space for you on the couch. And here's the hardest truth. When someone no longer turns to you emotionally, it's not because you stopped being trustworthy. It's often because they've stopped seeing emotional closeness as necessary. That doesn't mean they don't care, but it does mean something in the relationship has shifted. So ask yourself, when was the last time they opened up to me about something real? When was the last time they came to me first? If you can't remember, that's your answer. And if this feels familiar, I hope you know you're not crazy and you're not imagining it. You're simply recognizing that the closeness you once had has started to fade. In the next part, we'll talk about something even more difficult. What happens when love not only pulls away emotionally, but physically? Because when someone stops reaching for you, that's when silence turns into something you can feel in your bones. Sign 5. Physical disconnection. When love begins to fade, it doesn't always speak in words. More often, it shows up in what's no longer there, in the things you don't feel anymore. There's a kind of silence that's louder than any argument, and it lives in the space between two bodies that used to reach for each other without hesitation. The shift happens quietly. You go to hold their hand, and they pull away. Not harshly, just enough to remind you that something has changed. You lean in for a kiss, and it feels obligatory, a quick peck, a distracted gesture, not the warmth it used to carry. Touch used to be its own kind of language. It used to say, I'm here with you. It said, I care. It said, you're still the person I choose. You didn't have to ask for a hug because it came naturally. You didn't think twice about sitting close on the couch because closeness wasn't a question. But when someone starts to disconnect emotionally, their body follows. They stop reaching out. They stop sitting beside you when you're watching TV. They stop rubbing your back as they pass by or placing a hand on yours just because. And they don't even realize they've stopped because for them, the instinct is gone. That automatic urge to connect, to be near you, has slowly unraveled. Let me tell you about Gloria and Rai. For most of their marriage, Rai would kiss Gloria on the forehead every night before bed. It was a small thing, something you might overlook, but to Gloria, it meant everything. It was his way of saying, I see you, even when the day was long or the words weren't many. It was the last soft moment they shared before sleep. But then one night the kiss didn't come, and then it didn't come the next night or the night after that. At first, Gloria chalked it up to him being tired or preoccupied. She gave him space. She didn't want to make a big deal out of something so small, but as time passed, other things disappeared too. He stopped sitting close to her in the evenings. He stopped wrapping his arms around her while she made coffee. The little gestures that once said, I love you without speaking a word, were gone. And the silence they left behind wasn't just in the air, it was in her heart. She felt like her body was suddenly unwelcome, like her touch had become a burden. And even though he hadn't said a single harsh word, she felt rejected just the same. Here's the part most people don't say out loud. When emotional closeness fades, physical touch becomes awkward. It starts to feel like you're reaching across a distance that wasn't there before. And when you're the only one reaching, it begins to feel like a mistake. That's when the rejection really settles in, not because they pushed you away, but because they stopped pulling you in. You begin to wonder, is it me? Am I too much now, too needy? But the truth is, you're craving something that used to be natural between you, and now it feels like you're asking for permission just to be close. That's not love. That's loneliness in disguise. And if you're always the one initiating touch, always the one leaning in while they lean back, you'll eventually start to question your worth. But you need to hear this. You are not too much. Wanting closeness, wanting connection, wanting to be held, those are human needs, not weaknesses. You deserve to be with someone who reaches for you, not out of routine, but because they still feel pulled to you. Someone who still sees your presence as a comfort, not a chore, because real love doesn't stop reaching, even after years, even after arguments, even after life gets complicated, it still chooses you. So if you've noticed the touch has faded, if your body feels invisible next to the person who used to hold it like home, listen to that feeling. It's telling you something true. And in a moment, we're going to pull all of this together, every quiet sign, every small shift, and talk about what it means and what you can do from here. Because recognizing it is the beginning of clarity. And clarity isn't about blame, it's about honesty. And that kind of honesty might just be the most loving thing you can offer yourself. Maybe as you've been listening, you recognized one of these signs. Maybe it was just one small shift that hit a little too close to home. Or maybe you saw yourself in every single one. And if that's the case, take a deep breath, because this video wasn't made to hurt you. It wasn't meant to leave you feeling broken. It was meant to help you give words to something your heart has probably been whispering for a while. Most relationships don't fall apart in an instant. They drift, they stretch and wear thin over time. Not because people are bad, but because life is hard. And sometimes the people we love the most slowly stop showing up in the ways we used to count on. The silence between two people can grow louder than any argument, and when affection fades, when the time and touch and tenderness begin to disappear, it's easy to start wondering if it's all in your head, but it's not. That ache you've been feeling, that emotional emptiness, it means something. And if nothing else, I hope this video helped you see that you're not crazy, and you're certainly not alone. You deserve a love that still sees you, that still chooses you, that still listens, not out of obligation, but because your voice still matters to them. And if that's not what you have right now, then maybe the next chapter isn't about fighting for someone else's effort, but returning to your own self-worth. So I want to ask you, honestly, what part of this resonated with you the most? Was it the silence, the distance, the lack of warmth? Let me know in the comments. Just write the number or say, I've felt this. I read every single message, and I know someone out there might need to see your story to feel seen in their own. If this spoke to your heart, please hit the like button. That one small click helps this message reach someone else who might be silently struggling. And if you'd like to keep exploring these kinds of conversations, don't forget to subscribe, because here we talk about the stuff people often hide, but we say it gently, the way real life feels. Until we meet again, be kind to yourself. You're not asking for too much. You're asking for something real, and you deserve a love that never goes quiet.